Sam from Sugar Spun Run, and today we are making chocolate cookies. Not just any chocolate cookies though, these are a seriously intense chocolate experience. You're going to end up with a soft, fudgy chocolate cookie that's just absolutely loaded with nicely chopped chocolate. Let's go ahead and get started by melting our butter. All right, so for today's recipe, you need 1 cup of unsalted butter, and I am going to melt this in the microwave, but of course you could melt it in a saucepan on the stovetop instead, if you prefer. Just drop this in. And one thing about melting butter is do it slowly. It would also help if you cut the butter into pieces first. It's not mandatory, but you could to help it melt more evenly. If you try to heat it all at once for like 60 seconds, it's going to explode in your microwave. Ask me how I know. All right, so my butter is pretty much melted here. I'm just gonna give it a stir and that'll get the last bit of it. I'm going to set it on my scale. This is 226 grams of butter for those of you using metric measurements. All right, let me go ahead and tare this. Now, often when we're using melted butter, I will tell you to wait for it to cool a bit before you add your sugar, because warm butter can melt your sugar and leave you with a greasy cookie. But what we're going to do is we're going to take the cocoa powder that goes in the dough and we're going to add it right now to the warm butter. You're going to need 2/3 cups or 65 grams. Since I'm using a scale, I can just drop it right in there. My gosh, I need to get more cocoa powder. Just a moment. So by adding the cocoa powder to the warm butter, this serves 2 purposes. First, we're going to sort of bloom the cocoa. The warm liquid will help get a lot of nice chocolate flavor infused into the dough in a way that it wouldn't if we added it with the dry ingredients. I'm also going to add a little bit of instant coffee here, about a ½ teaspoon. This is optional, but it doesn't make your cookies taste like coffee. What it does is this helps bring out that rich chocolate flavor, and I also like to add it with the warm butter for that same reason of blooming. Now we're going to go ahead and whisk this in. And I think I said this is 2 purposes, but I only told you 1. The other purpose is that it's going to help cool down that butter so we can keep rolling along with that recipe, or this recipe. We don't have to wait for the butter to cool down because we are cooling it down with our cocoa. And it has just been brought to my attention that you guys can see my computer, so I'm gonna push that back. That's where I have my recipe to make sure I don't mess anything up. All right, and now we're going to add our sugar because our butter's cooled down and we can. So we're going to start with brown sugar, which adds a really nice moisture to the cookie. And we're going to add 1 cup or 200 grams. And I just kind of try to compact this sugar as I add it, just to help with any lumps that might be in it. You want to firmly pack it if you're using a measuring cup. We're also going to use some granulated sugar. You'll need 3/4 cups or 150 grams of this. Make sure you're tearing your scale. All right, we don't need this scale for a bit. So next thing we need is eggs. We're going to add 2 large eggs, and because we're working with warm butter, you want these eggs to be room temperature. Otherwise, you run the risk of cold eggs sort of like shocking your dough, and which will keep everything from incorporating the way we want it to. So there's 1 egg. So we're gonna do this one-handed. Look at that. I don't know if that's egg or water. We're just gonna keep going. Next, you need 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, and I'm using my homemade vanilla extract, which smells amazing. If you haven't watched my video on how to make vanilla extract at home, you should definitely check that out. All right, we are going to vigorously whisk these ingredients together. So obviously we want the dough to be well incorporated and nice and uniform, but vigorously whisking these things is also going to help us get those nice shiny tops, kind of like you would get in a brownie. We're gonna go a little crazy for like 30 seconds of whisking, and then I'm gonna try to clean my shirt. So after about 30 seconds, this should be nice and glossy and just beautiful. Slide this out of the way, and let's talk about our dry ingredients. We'll need that scale again. And the first thing that we need is our flour. You need 2 1/4 cups or 280 grams of all-purpose flour. Add this right in. We're also going to add a teaspoon of baking soda and 3/4 teaspoon of table salt. And we will whisk everything together, get that nicely combined. And then let's add this to our chocolate mixture. I usually do this in like 3 parts, 2 or 3 parts. I'm actually not going to use the whisk anymore. I'm going to switch over to my spatula. I talk about this a lot, but when you're adding your dry ingredients to your wet ingredients, when it comes to cookies at least, it's best to do this gradually because the wet ingredients need a little bit of time and effort to absorb those dry ingredients. And if you add all the flour at once, it's going to be really tough to get everything combined. It's a lot more work. Your dough could end up too dry and crumbly. All right, this is nicely combined, but we're not done with it yet. Let's slide this out of the way and let's talk about our chocolate. So I like to use chopped chocolate bars for this recipe rather than use chocolate chips. You could use chocolate chips. I would use about 2 cups of chocolate chips, but chopped chocolate bars are the way to go. You can use semi-sweet or dark chocolate bars. I'm using 60% today, but I often do use semi-sweet. And we're just going to finely chop this up. Now, the reason I like to use this chopped chocolate instead is because chocolate chips are designed to hold their shape. So once the cookie's baked, they do that, and you get those, you know, chips of chocolate in your cookie. When you chop a chocolate bar that is not made with the purpose of retaining its shape, what it does is it melts really, really nicely into the dough. So then you have a sort of gooey, very chocolatey cookie with plenty of chocolate flavor in every bite. And you can see I am chopping this, so I have some like pieces that are really fine and shaved chocolate pieces, and then I have some more substantial pieces that you will, you know, notice when you bite into them. I really like that blend of both. I don't know if I already said this, it's 8 ounces or 226 grams. And this just makes for a really nice chocolate cookie. Let's add this into our dough, all that chocolate in there. All right, and we'll fold this in. Get that chocolate nicely distributed. All right, now there is one downside to this dough, and that is that it needs to chill. So I'm going to go ahead and cover this with plastic wrap, and the dough is going to need to chill for at least 30 minutes. You can chill it for longer. Just note that if you chill it overnight or even more than a few hours, what happens is the dough can get really firm and difficult to scoop, so you usually need to let it sit at room temperature for a little bit before you can scoop it. Don't bake it right away or the cookies end up flat, which is just kind of sad. All right, I'm gonna chill this. Hopefully my shirt's not stained. Get my kids a drink. I don't know if you can see them, but they are suddenly very thirsty, and I'll be right back. All right, look at that. It was just water, not egg. So while your cookie dough is chilling, a little bit before you're ready to begin baking your cookies, you're going to want to get your oven preheating to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 175 degrees Celsius. I've got a baking sheet that I've lined with parchment paper, and I'm going to scoop these cookies to be kind of big. I like them to be about 3 tablespoons, so I'm just using my 1.5 tablespoon guide twice. This is about 60 grams of dough per cookie. So I like these to be nice and smooth, so I will roll them into a ball, and we'll space them about 2 inches apart on the baking sheet. Now, can you just drop these cookies? I haven't yet, but let's go ahead and just do that and see how they bake up in comparison. They're not gonna be as pretty. That's a big piece of chocolate. That cookie is gonna be mine. They're gonna be so good. All right, these are going to go into our oven where they're going to need to bake for about 9 to 11 minutes. You do wanna take care that you don't overbake them or they're going to be dry. If they're dry and like crispy, it just means they spent too long in the oven or your oven may be running a little bit too hot. When they come out of the oven, they may appear slightly underbaked. We're going to let them cool completely on the baking sheet, which will let them continue to cook through, and will keep them nice and soft and chewy for days. Now, if you really want to put these cookies a little bit over the top, you can add a sprinkling of sea salt while they're still warm. And you can see the cookies that I rolled are just prettier, rounder, and like a nice crackly looking as opposed to the ones that I just dropped on the baking sheet. And that is how you make these decadent chocolate cookies. If you're a chocolate fan, make sure you also check out my easy brownies from scratch. Those are pretty good, wouldn't you say? Yeah? Thank you so much for watching.
And I'll see you next time.
Ready to try it? Cheers. Good? Look at all that chocolate. Look at that. What do you think? Is it a good cookie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there an oat in front of you?
There's an oat? I don't see an oat. Sorry if you hear growling in the background, that's just my children. My sugar spoon is not big enough. So, I don't know why I said so. There's an oat.